"I'm going to dump that old hag in the mountains," my son-in-law whispered in my ear during the funeral of my husband, the company CEO. When I looked at him, he had an evil grin on his face. Now that the president has left, the company is finally mine. He had been vying for the presidency up until this point and had finally revealed his true nature. But life isn't that simple. My lovely son-in-law, the time was approaching when I would have to teach him a lesson. "The battle has begun. Please lend me your strength," I cried out in my heart as I looked at my husband's altar. Sally is my name. I am a 55-year-old housewife, married for 30 years to my husband Andy. I met my husband as a co-worker, and we became friends, then lovers, before marrying and having our daughter, Marlene, a year later. My husband used to work for a construction company, but when he was 35, he decided to start his own company. "I wanted to design, so I became a first-class architect," he says. "I get a rush from seeing a client's vision come true." My husband told me with a twinkle in his eye that he had started a design firm. I wasn't sure if it would work because our daughter was only 4 years old at the time. But we were a team, and I was determined to support my husband. I decided to stand by my husband. "Let us collaborate. I'm in on your dream." Fortunately, the company grew steadily, and my husband demonstrated that he was capable of running it. I was devoted to supporting him, and I have been doing so for the past 20 years. My husband then hired Stephen, who was working at an affiliated company. He, falling in love with my daughter, was an unexpected turn of events, but I thought I could trust Stephen, who worked so hard for my husband. In retrospect, this was a mistake. Stephen, my son-in-law, agreed with my husband's point of view and obediently supported my husband's as a company executive. My daughter, on the other hand, felt uneasy about his excessive words, possibly because of his excessive zeal for his work. "Hey, Mom, sometimes I worry about something these days." "What?" "Maybe it's because he's been drinking, but Stephen said, I wish that old man would just screw himself. I can increase the profitability of this company." What a horrible thing to say. That's awful. They say that when you're drunk, your true feelings come out. But I doubt he'd ever betray your father. Although my daughter's words lingered in my mind, I forced myself to believe Stephen was also thinking about the company. We had no way of knowing what his true intentions were at the time. A year ago, seemingly out of nowhere, something happened. My husband, Andy, who had always been in good health, began to look unwell and lost his appetite. He also frequently complained about back pain, so we decided to have him examined. The outcomes were disastrous. A serious disease was discovered, which couldn't be treated, and he didn't have much time to live. Only my daughter's family and I knew this. We were all concerned about our future, but Stephen, who was with us at the time, reassured us. "I hope Andy gets better. The company will be fine. You can leave everything to me with confidence." Stephen's words were oddly assuring. Although I assume these words were meant to reassure us, the triumphant look on his face filled me with unease. Stephen's attitudes gradually got worse from there. According to one of my husband's longtime subordinates, he had started speaking down to those around him, and other employees were having a bad time. Some of them left the company because they couldn't stand Stephen's outbursts, and others lost motivation to work. "Stephen, you're very dedicated to your work," I told him, thinking he might be overwhelmed by the fact that he had to keep the company afloat. "But could you please consider your employees' feelings as well?" "What? You're making big claims. You should just stay by your husband's side. He looks to be on the verge of dying at any moment, without interfering in my affairs." Nonetheless, Andy has carefully taken care of this business. "You know, the company is almost mine now." "You should be grateful that I, a wise man, have remained silent and followed this jerk of a president until now." When I heard this ear-splitting tirade, I couldn't believe it, and the anxiety I was feeling the other day grew even stronger. Stephen's words and actions have become worse with each passing day, and he has made comments that put employees under pressure. Employees who have been with the company since its inception had been doing what they had always done, obtaining contracts by repeatedly talking to clients about their needs and wants. This was my husband's policy, but he responded with a blunt remark. In this world, efficiency is everything. Don't be such a jerk. I'm going to fire you. Furthermore, he had switched to a method of sharing reports on a computer, which occasionally caused problems for the older employees. Can't you old people even use a computer correctly? Get out of here. You're stifling my progress. I don't want you to work for me. He'd yell at them, kick over the garbage cans, and make them pick up the paper scraps that were scattered around. After all, when our long-term business partners began to suffer as a result of the recession, we are not doing this for free, so we will no longer do business with you. He started destroying the trust that had been built over time. When my daughter, Marlene, asked for advice about him, I was at a loss for what to do. He's been treating Marlene like a servant lately. He would become enraged if she resisted even slightly. Who would marry you if you weren't the boss's daughter? Your personality and appearance are not my type. Marlene complained to me that Stephen had lost his kindness as he spat at her as if he was looking at something filthy. Mom, Stephen has changed. No, the Stephen we see now is the real Stephen. And we were duped. My daughter sobbed out of frustration. After hearing about Stephen's actions from his subordinate, my husband was also concerned about his employee. He summoned me to his bedside one day and asked for a favor. All right, I'll take care of it, so don't be concerned. I promised my husband something. More bad things happened a short time later. Despite his best efforts, my husband died within a year of being told he had little time to live. I couldn't stop crying at my husband's funeral, remembering how we shared similar values, had never argued, and had lived a happy life thanks to him. However, when we were listening to the priest's sermon, Stephen brought his face close to mine and whispered in my ear, I'm going to dispose of you in the mountain. I noticed that he had an evil smile when I looked at him. This was Stephen's true nature. He had been on the board of directors since my husband's hospitalization, and now that he was gone, he must have felt secure in his position as president. From now on, I can make the company do whatever I want. I could almost hear his thoughts. Stephen, who has taken the word for granted, has no idea what fate awaits him from now on. I'll be the one to put an end to this. It is now time for me to keep my promise to you. Give me your strength. I looked at my husband's coffin and confirmed my resolve. A shareholders' meeting was called following the funeral. Stephen, the director, arrived late and sat down on a chair in the center of the room with a thump, looking around at everyone. He was startled when he saw me sitting at the same table as him, and his eyes fluttered several times. Why the old hag? I could hear him mumble. I had to hold back my laughter. The next item on the agenda is the removal of Stephen from the board of directors, the moderator said. My son-in-law, who had not heard anything, became terrified. Hey, wait a minute. What are you on about? I didn't hear what you were saying. He tried to stand up so quickly that he almost fell off his chair. And everyone in the room laughed at Stephen's misfortune. In fact, my husband gave me a majority stake in his company several years ago. Whoever owns the most shares has a strong influence over a company. I had exercised that right by requesting that the board of directors call a shareholders meeting. Stephen was aware of the shareholders meeting, but he had no idea it was to discuss this dismissal. How can I be fired without a valid reason? I am the president's son-in-law. It appears that you have been very cold to the employees who have worked for us until now. This will cause the company to lose ground to the competition. That's why, you amateurs, you have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not saying we can't experiment with new approaches. I'm saying we should look after our business partners as well as our employees. The shareholders nodded their heads as they listened to me. They understood and agreed with Andy's ideas about the company. Stephen noticed this, raised his eyes, filling with rage, and yelled at me. Things like that won't lead to the company's profit. Oh, you work solely for your own benefit, not for the benefit of the company, don't you? I know the truth. What are you talking about? Stephen, you're completely out of line. Take a look at this. I held up the internal documents that my late husband had entrusted to me in front of Stephen. Have you been misappropriating company funds for your own personal use? The room erupted at that point, and all eyes were drawn to Stephen. He was agitated, and there was a cold sweat on his brow. How did you find this? It was given to me by Andy. That man had a customer-first policy. But you denied it and attempted to change it, didn't you? That's why he wanted me to bring this up. Damn! It's not fair of you to be snooping around. The company cannot afford to have embezzlers on its payroll. So, who will be the next president? There's nobody else but me. Don't be concerned. My husband has requested that I take over. What? What nonsense are you on about? A novice hag cannot run a business. It's no surprise Stephen said that, because he knows nothing about me. Because the company was still small, it was customary for the company's executives to meet in a home conference room. At these meetings, I always sat next to my husband, the company's president, and voiced my opinions. My husband trusted me because I knew everything about the company's inner workings, even though I didn't let anyone know. However, I had always been in the know, and when my husband transferred the majority shares to me, I assumed that I would eventually pass them to our son-in-law. That would never happen anymore. I'm going to pretend it never happened, I said coldly. Then, realizing his predicament, he flipped out and cried to me, pleading for forgiveness. Please don't let me go. Please accept my apologies for all of my disrespect. I swear I will work for the company for the rest of my life. I'll even return the money I stole. Do you really believe you can get away with it? I intended to use the funds to start a new business. It was not for monetary gain. That's funny. You've given women luxury foreign cars, brand-name goods, and jewelry as gifts. It doesn't sound like you're ready to start a business. Anyway, do you really believe you can start a business with the money you stole? In any case, you've been fired. The cowardly Stephen now brought up the subject of my daughter. If you make me suffer, your little daughter will suffer as well. Is that what you're looking for? Marlene has decided to divorce you, and she should have packed her belongings and left by now. She expressed her dissatisfaction with you. Oh, no. Oh, and I've reported embezzlement to the police, so be ready. Stephen was later removed from the board of directors, and he was arrested and imprisoned for embezzlement. My daughter had abandoned him, leaving him to fend for himself. As the president of a company, I am busy every day, but I am working hard to grow the company my husband left me. I will continue to respect the employees who have served us for many years, and while I will implement new ideas, my philosophy of putting myself in the shoes of the customer will not change. My daughter, who is no longer stressed, greets me with a smile at home. She's still young, and her life is just getting started. I will keep a close eye on her future.
What can a loser like you do? My brother snorted as he said those words. Living with my brother and his wife, our mother was being taken advantage of. She arrived at our house in a worn-out state, crying, "I don't want to return there." The sight of her played in my mind as I clenched my teeth. "Hey, are you sure you can support that old hag? Are you going to take her in? Huh?" He was treating our beloved mother so badly and was ridiculing me as well. A wave of anger surged within me and I gripped the phone tighter. Still, I responded calmly. "If you're okay with it, I'll take her in." My name is Rena. I'm 30 years old this year, married for 4 years. I have a happy life with my kind husband and our 2-year-old daughter. We're blessed in our work and lead a joyful life. I glanced at the date on the calendar and pulled out my smartphone. Today is my mother's birthday. "Happy 58th birthday, Mom. Are you well? Is there anything bothering you?" I texted her and soon got a reply. "Thank you for your text. I'm doing fine. Don't worry. How are you and your family? I'm always praying for your happiness." Even after reading her response, I couldn't help but worry. Currently, my mother is living with my brother and his wife at our childhood home. Our family was a household of 4: my father, my mother, older brother, and me. My father was a strict disciplinarian, with strong patriarchal beliefs and a controlling type. Because of him, my mother and I had been oppressed all along. My maternal grandfather worked at a company owned by my father's father, my paternal grandfather, and my mother was chosen to be the wife of the future company president. Due to the absolute power disparity between the 2 grandfathers, she could not refuse and was sent off to marry him almost like a hostage. The company also fell due to the burst of the economic bubble before my father could take over. However, it seems like they still had money left, and I never saw my father work. He would start drinking in the daytime, and his abusive words were directed at my mother and me. Living in fear of his quick temper, my mother had no choice but to obey. Even so, my father held steadfast to his outdated belief that women were inferior and men were unquestionably superior. He doted on my brother with this perspective, treating him as if he was something special. My brother got anything he wanted growing up, while I could never even express my desires. "A woman shouldn't be greedy," our father would scold. It's due to this upbringing that my brother developed a sense of entitlement, always believing he was special while treating me as less than him, constantly ridiculing me. I remember how painful it was to grow up in such an environment. Every day I dreamed of leaving home as soon as possible. Despite my excellent grades, my brother, who performed poorly in school, was allowed to go to expensive private high school and college, while I was not even permitted by our father to attend high school. "Women don't need education. It's a waste. You should either get married soon or start working at a minimum wage job," he would say dismissively. I remember the time when my brother told me, "You're a dumb girl who's a failure. It's a waste for you to go to high school." And I cried in frustration at the utter unfairness of it all. In the end, my mother secretly arranged for me to attend a boarding high school. Despite the tough home environment, my mother was always on my side. "Rena, it's okay. You can escape from here. You will surely find happiness." I remember my mother saying these words before I went off to high school. I graduated from university using scholarships and money I earned myself. Since high school, I've barely returned home. I didn't attend my brother's wedding, and I didn't tell them when I got married. But I kept in touch with my mother, and occasionally met up with her. It's not an overstatement to say that I owe who I am today to my mother, a presence of utmost importance in my life. She was a gentle soul who may have been weak-minded, but loved me with all her heart. I always wished happiness for her. I remember when our father died from years of poor lifestyle habits. I didn't attend the funeral, but I received shocking news from my mother. On his deathbed, my father told my brother and his wife to move back home and live with our mother. Since then, my brother and his wife have been living with my mother. I wanted to protest, but my mother said it was okay, so I didn't say anything more. Instead, I kept in touch with her like this. Still, it was my brother. Would he take care of my mother properly? Was my mother truly okay? I always had a feeling of unease. After a while, my fears proved right. One night, the intercom of our apartment rang unexpectedly. When I answered, my mother stood there, dressed ragged. Despite it being late fall, she wore a thin, old, short-sleeved shirt and a skirt so worn out I couldn't tell when she had gotten it. Her hair was disheveled, her cheeks hollow, her eyes sunken, and she was trembling uncontrollably. I was taken aback by her appearance and raised my voice. "Mom? What on earth happened to you?" "Rena, I'm sorry to just show up like this," she uttered in a voice so weak it could disappear, as tears streamed down her face. I welcomed her in, and my husband quickly prepared a warm drink and a blanket. Once she had settled down, Mom began to speak in a halting voice. Soon, after she had started living with my brother and his wife Nicole, it seems they had been treating her like a maid. Not only had they forced her to do all the housework, but if she didn't do it to their satisfaction, my brother would scorn her, calling her useless and a nuisance, threatening to throw her out. Nicole was calling my mom an old hag. She even sold my mom's few precious jewelry pieces and clothes. And then they'd gone about spreading false rumors that my mom was a troublesome mother-in-law. Mom had lost weight rapidly, and when she fell ill and bedridden, she was roused and forced to do household chores again. Seeing my mom talk through her tears, my heart ached unbearably. Mom, why didn't you tell me you were suffering so much? Rena, I've put you through hardship since you were a child. I didn't want to burden you any further. I thought if I could just bear it. My mom said, her voice trembling. Then an email came in. Oh, it's from Nicole. Where are you? You didn't do the laundry and there's no food. Do you want your things to be sold again? The email made her hands shake. I'm sorry, Rena. I don't want to go back to that house. Upon hearing my mother's words, I pulled out my smartphone without saying a word. I dialed the number my mother gave me. After the dial tone, my brother picked up. Who's this? In response to his gruff voice, I answered. This is Rena. Mom's here with me. Oh, it's you. That old hag. Leaving without doing the chores. So she was with you. Tell her to come back immediately. It seems you've been treating Mom quite badly. I've heard everything. My voice was trembling with anger, but my brother just snorted and replied. Ha! What about it? What can a dimwit like you do? What? You've been overworking Mom to the point of sickness, and you think that's okay? I won't let her live with you any longer. Hey, do you think you can afford to support that old hag? She's been a housewife all her life, can't do anything, and has no money. Are you going to take her in? What? No more old hag! She was so handy as a housekeeper! A voice that sounded like his wife came from afar. They've been treating my dear mother so poorly, and even making fun of me. I can't stand it. I felt a surge of rage towards my brother and his wife, and my grip on the phone tightened. Still, I said calmly, If you say so, brother, then I will take Mom in. Huh? Well, if you're going to take her, that's fine. It'll clear out some space in the house, and I'll be relieved. Understood. Mom will be living with me, so don't contact us anymore. I hung up the phone. Rena, I'll take good care of your mother too, my husband said, taking my hand. Our daughter cheerfully climbed onto my mother's lap, calling her grandma, and my mother hugged her and cried. Half a year later, our doorbell was rung repeatedly. When I looked out, my angry brother was there. Next to him was a grumpy woman with a flamboyant outfit, probably his wife, Nicole. What do you want? How did you find out where we live? We looked it up. Just open up. There's something we want to ask you. My husband and mother were by my side. I had my husband take our daughter into another room while my mother and I handled it. The first thing my brother said when he walked in was, "What's this about our house being sold?" Oh, you got the message? Yes, my company bought your house. I responded calmly. Your company? What are you talking about? Exactly what I said. I'm the head of a well-known real estate company around here, so it's my company. By the way, doesn't the company you work for subcontract to us? When my brother heard the name of my real estate company, his face changed color. That's ridiculous! You, a dropout and a loser, working at that real estate company? And you're the head? That's impossible. If you're suspicious, why don't you make a phone call or something to verify? But please, don't cause any inconvenience to the company. I showed him my business card. As soon as he saw the card, my brother fell silent. His face flushed red. Indeed, after graduating from university, I had worked hard and been hired by a major real estate company. Later, I was headhunted as an executive for a newly established company, Company A. For your information, I met my husband at work, and we got married. He's what you would call a landowner, so I think we're considerably wealthier than you. There's no reason for you to call me a dropout or a loser. I could easily support Mom, you know. My brother, wide-eyed and gritting his teeth, didn't respond. His wife's face expressed shock. Damn it! Okay. What about our family home? What do you mean you sold it? My brother nearly foamed at the mouth as he yelled. My mother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. You may not have known, but after your father passed away, the house was transferred to my name. So I sold the house and land to Rena's company, using my rights. So you should leave as soon as possible. What? What? What are you talking about, old woman? Wait, what's going on? You said that as the oldest son, the house was yours, didn't you? My brother and his wife were in a panic, their complexions changing rapidly. What's wrong with me selling something that's in my name? Sorry to break it to you, but I've broken free from your influence. I won't live as you dictate anymore, my mother said resolutely. In response, my brother yelled at her. What the hell are you talking about, you worthless old hag? His wife joined in. That's right! You've never worked a day in your life, just being supported by others. What are you talking about? Mom works hard. She's the manager of an apartment building that my husband and I own. She's very friendly, always keeps the place clean, and is loved by the residents. And she gets paid for it too. I replied firmly. Upon hearing this, my brother, who had been standing until then, fell silent and slumped into a chair. Next to him, Nicole whispered something in his ear. Knowing my prideful brother, he must have been crushed by the unexpected defeat at the hands of his sister and the rejection from his mother. If there's nothing else, you can leave now. I don't want to be involved with you. At my words, my brother lifted his head. His face, previously filled with rage, now showed a fawning, grinning expression. All right. But listen, you're rich now, right? Then give me some money. I recently lost my job, you see. I'm having money troubles. What? I was shocked at his audacity. Hey, Mom could give money to me too. You've got money from selling the house, right? Just think of it as helping out your adorable son, and give me some cash. Then I'll leave. Just as I was about to respond, my mother raised her voice. Enough already! Have some shame! I was taken aback to see my refined, gentle mother raising her voice like that for the first time. My brother and his wife looked stunned as well. I apologize for raising you to prey on your sister like a shameless creature, but there are things you should and shouldn't do. Don't disturb us anymore, and go home. Hearing this, my brother started to tremble again. Shut up and listen, old hag. You're telling me what's what. Be prepared. I'll squeeze every dime of your inheritance from you. Nicole added, Yes, give us the money already. To these two, my mother coldly retorted, That's if there's anything left. From now on, I plan to spend all the money from the sale of the house for myself and Rena and her family. I have no intention of leaving a single penny for you two. What the hell, you old crone? I'm cutting ties with both of you. From now on, please stay away from me and Rena. Leave that house immediately. Seeing my mother like this, I was so proud of her, a desire to applaud, and I was genuinely happy. My mother, who had been oppressed and obedient to everything, was finally freed from the curse of that house. Do you understand now? Please go home, I said, rubbing my mother's trembling back. Damn! No, we won't leave. We won't leave here until we get the money, at least. Yes, we'll squat in that house. My brother and his wife were still glaring at us. Then a low, calm voice echoed in the room. What do you mean, you won't leave? Standing there was my husband. My husband, with his gentle voice, spoke to my mother. Mother-in-law, I'm sorry. Could you please watch our daughter? You did great. Don't worry about the rest. Everything will be fine. Hearing my husband's words, my mother said, Thank you, and got up from her chair. Looking at my husband, my brother and his wife turned pale, and their eyes widened in surprise. What? Who are you? Nice to meet you. I am Rena's husband. By the way, what were you saying to my wife and mother-in-law earlier? My husband replied with a straight face. My brother and his wife suddenly turned docile. That's to be expected. My husband stands at a tall 6'3", has a solid build, and a strong, imposing face. In fact, he even holds a black belt in judo. Despite his peaceful nature, his kindness towards me, his intellect, and his doting love for our daughter, it's no surprise that people meeting him for the first time might think he looks intimidating. especially to someone like my brother, who can only show off and look down on women. My husband is the most difficult type to handle. I just remembered I have something to do, so I should be going. Yes, let's go. My brother and his wife quickly changed their attitude and left. Their retreat was so comical, I had to restrain myself from laughing. In the quiet house, my husband touched my shoulder and told me, "You did well. You must be tired." My mother appeared holding my daughter, her face bright, and we embraced each other without saying a word. Fast forward to 1 year. My husband, my mother, and I continue to share a harmonious relationship. My mother continues her job as a building superintendent, and compared to that night when she showed up looking worn out, she is now lively and healthy. She adores and takes care of my daughter, which has been a great help to me. Of course, my daughter adores her grandmother too, and often sticks to her. Watching them brings feelings of happiness to both my husband and me. As for my brother, he, believe it or not, divorced shortly after that incident. He lost his house and his money, and after showing my husband his pathetic state, Nicole quickly left him. Nicole is currently striving for remarriage through dating, but due to her nasty nature and ulterior motives for money, it seems she can't find anyone. My brother was kicked out of his family home, jobless, and living alone in a rundown apartment while struggling with part-time jobs. Of course, I have no intentions of helping him, as he brought this upon himself. My mother and I plan to live without getting involved with him any further. By the way, we are planning to build a large, 2-family home soon. We could continue living in the condo my husband owns, but as my mother pointed out, it would become cramped as our daughter grows. "Let me use all the money from selling the house," she said, to which we gratefully accepted, despite chuckling at her enthusiasm. We are looking forward to living happily together in our new home. My name is Cindy. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. I met my husband Joe through a colleague at work, a kind of blind date, and we got married. Joe and I are of the same age and shared the same hobbies, and I thought life with him would be enjoyable. My in-laws were cheerful and kind people, and my mother-in-law said, "We were worried because Joe hadn't brought home a single potential bride until now. Please, take good care of Joe." Her words stabbed at my heart a bit, since I'm of the same age as him, but I pretended not to notice. A year has passed since our marriage. There were times when we argued and Joe would immediately mention divorce, but I thought that's part of married life, and that happened. I think we got along relatively well. On weekends, we drove and took day trips, a hobby of ours. Before we were married, I traveled alone a lot, but after marriage, we basically acted as a pair. Joe lived with his parents until we got married, and he seemed to use their car when he went out. So after we got married, we have been using my car since. That car is nearing its limits. I was driving a compact car because I liked the design and rarely had passengers, but I am considering buying a new one before the next car inspection. When I consulted with Joe about this, he agreed, saying, "It's your car, so do as you like. But if you're going to replace it anyway, why not get a larger car instead of a compact?" he suggested, and I agreed. The next weekend, we went to look at cars together. As we started looking at cars, Joe got more excited. The car, he said, was good, was quite expensive. Certainly, its performance was good. It was spacious inside, and there was nothing to complain about. But I hesitated because I hadn't considered spending that much. "How about I take out a loan in my name? The frequency of driving is about the same for both of us, and we're paying from our household budget, so it doesn't matter who does it," Joe suggested, and we decided to consider it in that direction. We went to look at other cars, but we liked the first one best, and decided on it. However, the loan was not approved in Joe's name. It seemed to have been flagged because he had just changed jobs. Then, Joe started swearing at the clerk. "I'm saying I'll buy it. Can't you do something about it?" This is one of the things I dislike about Joe. No matter which store we go to, his attitude towards the staff is somewhat condescending. When I tried to stop Joe, he got sulky and went outside to smoke. My husband has a domineering side. Whenever something doesn't sit well with him, he quickly threatens divorce, which is really tiresome. I profusely apologized to the salesperson. Perhaps it would be easier to get a loan if the amount was lower, or if it's cheap. I could pay in full. As I was consulting with the salesperson, my husband came back. "Hey, why not buy it under Cindy's name? I'll be the one paying anyway," he said, leaving me to ponder. Actually, I found this idea appealing, and other cars just didn't resonate with me. I nodded and signed the document. They said it would take a few months for the car to be delivered, so while I looked forward to its arrival, I drove around in my old car, cherishing our last moments together. My husband, sitting in the passenger seat, fiddled with his smartphone, saying, "Finally, bidding farewell to this cramped space, huh?" During the drive, I let my husband take over the wheel. As I casually glanced at the smartphone left on the dashboard, a message caught my eye. "Did you get a new car? And it's a luxury car at that." It was from one of my husband's colleagues. My husband seemed to have been showing off our new car. My husband has a vanity issue, so he probably hasn't mentioned that the car is bought under my name. I thought it didn't matter, but this car ended up changing our fate. 3 months later, the first place we went to in the newly delivered car was my in-laws' house. We visited to celebrate my father-in-law's retirement. My husband always says we need to honor his parents, so it seemed like a good opportunity. When my father-in-law greeted us, he excitedly looked at the car and said, "So, this is the new car. Nice! So cool!" I suggested, "Let's go out together in this next time," to which he responded with delight. My mother-in-law too said, "I want to go too! How about a spa trip?" She seemed excited, so I decided to make plans, taking into account their wishes. At my in-laws, we had a great time talking about my father-in-law's work and my husband's childhood. One memorable comment was, "I really wanted a daughter. I thought it would be fun to go out and share clothes with her, but it was you, Joe, who I gave birth to." She then added, "So Cindy, if you don't mind, let's go out together next time." I was thrilled. However, my husband didn't seem to find this amusing. Although my mother-in-law was only joking and she didn't say a word about not needing him, he was sulking. Before we got married, I found his pouting cute, but it becomes a bit annoying when it happens so frequently. Perhaps because his parents were present, he didn't say anything. But my husband often uses the threat of divorce to get me to comply when things don't go his way. We somehow managed to get through the situation and went back home. The next day, my husband came into the living room after work and declared, "The luxury car you bought will be a gift to my dad. If you oppose, we'll get a divorce." Huh? At first, I thought it was a joke and tried to laugh it off, but it seems my husband was dead serious. Hold on. Why are you talking about this all of a sudden? Dad was looking at that car with such envy. That's why the best gift for his retirement would be to present him that car and let him drive it. That's the ultimate way to honor my parents. What? I was taken aback, but for some reason, Joe was adamant and wouldn't back down. He's always been stubborn, and there are times when he flies off the handle if I don't comply with him. Feeling bothered, I tried to reason with him, saying, "We agreed to go out with your father together, didn't we? Giving a car as a gift is..." But he wasn't having any of it. The argument continued, and Joe finally started to lose his temper. "As their only son, I want to give back to Mom and Dad. I want them to feel grateful for having a son, not a daughter." It seemed that Joe was still bothered by his mother's remark from yesterday about wishing she'd had a daughter. Perhaps he was feeling competitive because his mother had said she wanted to go out with me. I was flabbergasted, but there's no way we could afford to gift a car of that value. Why don't we gift them a trip to a hot spring resort? You agreed to this yesterday, didn't you? Still unsatisfied, Joe glared at me. "I married you, a woman past her prime, didn't I? You, with nothing to brag about. Do you know who's responsible for the life we're leading? Just once, listen to what I have to say." Hearing his harsh words, my feelings for Joe rapidly cooled. Past her prime, huh? I was aware of it, but it's infuriating when someone else points it out. On the contrary, I'm doing the housework, so I'm probably better off than Joe, who can't do anything. I'm also working, and our livelihood doesn't rely solely on Joe's salary. With these thoughts, the parts about Joe I dislike started popping into my mind. His attitude towards waitstaff, his quickness to sulk, his unreasonable stubbornness. I had been trying to ignore it, but now it was starting to frustrate me. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, Joe left the room and came back. Then he handed me something. Huh? What caught my eye was a divorce paper. When I looked up in surprise, he said, "Just sign the car ownership transfer document. If you don't like it, you can fill out the divorce papers and leave, okay? What's it going to be?" And what's more, the divorce papers were already filled out. "I've had it," I muttered. "All right." When I did, Joe nodded in satisfaction, tossed the divorce papers aside, and retreated to his room. The next day, Joe brought the necessary documents for the car's title transfer, saying, "We need these. Can we do a title transfer even though we've just taken out a loan?" I pondered this question as I took the documents. I decided to confirm this with the dealership where we bought the car. It turns out changing the title while a loan is still in effect is quite a hassle. On top of that, because the user is changing, my father-in-law's approval is required, meaning it couldn't be a surprise gift as Joe wanted. Moreover, my father-in-law never hinted at wanting a car. If I explained this, I thought, Joe would give up. I also discussed the option of selling the car. I wasn't sure if I wanted to continue driving it now that it felt tainted. It was a popular model, and production hadn't caught up with demand, meaning it could take a while to get a new one. Therefore, I could potentially sell it at a high price. If so, I could use the money to pay off the loan and choose a new car that I like. When I got home from work and told Joe that changing the title is complicated because of the loan, he said, "Then we have no choice but to buy another car. Dad will definitely be delighted." Excuse me? Dad never said he wanted a car. "Guess we're really getting divorced then," Joe mumbled, and returned to his room. I just couldn't take it anymore. I was willing to give it a shot if he apologized, but I couldn't continue this marriage. I decided to pack my stuff. I also decided to sell the car. The dealership offering the highest price agreed to pick it up at a later date. I felt relieved. I planned to move out while Joe was at work the following week. This would put an end to everything. With these thoughts, I finished my Friday shift and returned home to find that the car was missing from the parking lot. What? I rushed inside to check if the car keys were still hanging in the usual spot. "It's not here!" I turned pale and dialed Joe's number. However, no matter how many times I called, he didn't pick up. Even after I sent a message asking him to get in touch, he didn't even read it. Did Joe take the car somewhere? But that car is already... 3 hours later, I finally got a message from him. He said he was going on a trip with a colleague, and that we both needed to cool down. "What?" I exclaimed, involuntarily raising my voice at my phone screen. It was frustrating, but if he was going on a trip, he certainly wouldn't be coming back tonight. I decided to quickly put the plans I had made over the past few days into motion. I called a real estate agent I knew from work and signed the lease on the apartment I had asked him to reserve. I also contacted a moving company. The next morning, the movers came and moved out all my belongings, furniture, and appliances. My new place was close by, and by mid-afternoon, my new life had begun. Perhaps it was the weight off my shoulders, but I found myself dozing off. Then I was awakened by the ringtone of my phone. It was a call from Joe. He must have come home, found me gone, and was surprised enough to call, I thought, smirking a bit as I answered the phone. "Cindy, can you help me?" As I expected, Joe's voice was frantic, but he didn't seem to be at home. He went on, "I've had an accident and my insurance isn't covering it." I didn't understand what he was talking about and responded, "What?" At that, Joe began to get angry. "That's why! The new car's insurance! I called the insurance company because I had an accident, but they say it's not covered." As I listened to him, I finally understood. What do you mean you had an accident? Where? Are you injured? I asked, trying to show some concern. It wasn't my fault. The other party was inattentive. But more importantly, what about the insurance? I let out a sigh. I thought I made myself clear, didn't I? I told you not to touch the car for a while. And Joe, you said you understood, right? So why did you take out the car without asking? And remember, we made a promise to inform each other when using the car separately. None of that matters now. For now, Cindy, call the insurance company from my side. Hearing the word accident certainly made me nervous. But if he has the energy to shout like this, it probably wasn't serious. I calmly stated the facts. That car, it's currently reported as stolen. When I got home, the car was gone, so I reported it to the police. In fact, that car was scheduled to be picked up for purchase today. And now you're telling me there's been an accident? What am I supposed to do? I had the insurance canceled because the sale was confirmed. I canceled it when I told you not to touch the car. Hearing this, my husband, or rather, my soon-to-be ex-husband, started to panic. Whoa! Hold on a minute! Even if I was driving our car, it shouldn't be considered stolen. Then Cindy, can you first withdraw the theft report? I understand about the insurance. We can talk about the money when I get back home. But I couldn't just accept what he said. Oh, by the way, I almost forgot to tell you. You and I are strangers now. I submitted our divorce papers 3 days ago, and they were accepted. Also, I'm not living in that house anymore. What? He shouted over the phone, but I hung up anyway. Even after hanging up, his calls kept coming in, and it was so bothersome that I turned off my phone. The next day, I took a day off from work to sort out my room. When I turned my phone back on in the morning, it was filled with missed calls from my ex-husband. There was another call around 1 a.m., probably when he got home. But he's the one who flippantly filled out the divorce papers, and he's the one who threatened me with divorce. If he thought that by mentioning divorce, I would do whatever he says, he was sadly mistaken. Sure, when we first got married, I would comply when threatened with divorce. I thought it would be too embarrassing to get divorced so soon, after finally getting married at 35. That's probably why he thought I would comply this time too. But once all those frustrations piled up, I got over my hesitation. While I was cleaning up my room and thinking about these things, my phone rang again. I assumed it was my ex-husband, again. But when I checked, it was from my mother-in-law. I got a call from Joe yesterday. He was talking about an accident and something about Cindy leaving, and I couldn't make heads or tails of it. What's going on? She asked. So I explained everything to my mother-in-law. I apologized to you and father-in-law, but the divorce is final. As for the money for the car and the division of property, I'm thinking of arranging a meeting to discuss it in the near future. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law apologized to me profusely and said, "If it's okay with you, could I attend that meeting? I'm afraid Joe might say something ridiculous." I agreed to have the post-divorce meeting at my in-laws' house. When I visited my in-laws for the first time in a while, my father-in-law was scolding my ex-husband. My mother-in-law, noticing my arrival, invited me into the living room. As expected, my ex-husband was sulking, but a bump on the head from his father forced him to reluctantly bow his head. But he said, "Because you only do what you want, my life is a mess." So I told him that I had consulted a lawyer about him constantly threatening me with divorce, which could be considered emotional abuse. Upon hearing this, my ex-husband's face turned pale. As a result of our discussions, we agreed that my ex-husband would pay for the original cost of the new car and the settlement for withdrawing the theft report. The difference would be covered by my father-in-law. On my way out, my mother-in-law said, "It's a shame that we couldn't hang out with you, Cindy." So I responded, "If it's okay with you, let's do it again," and left the place. It turned out that the ones who were with my husband during the accident were indeed the colleagues he had bragged about the car to that day. These colleagues were present at the scene, and thus learned about everything. The car was in my name, he was divorced, and that the car had been reported stolen. And so, rumors spread at his workplace, and he was being laughed at behind his back. Right around this time, there was a talk of a transfer, and he eagerly jumped on it, as he felt uncomfortable in his current position. But it was more of a demotion than a transfer, and he was sent to a rural area. He thought he would rely on convenience store food and laundromats since he couldn't do household chores. But when he arrived, there was nothing around him. It was a 30-minute drive to the nearest supermarket, and there was no laundromat to be found. Catherine, who invited me for a meal recently, said she was too scared to ask him how he's managing with his household chores. Catherine was genuinely surprised and delighted that I agreed to meet her, and now we get along as older friends. I'm satisfied now, having bought a new car within my budget and being able to enjoy solo trips, just like I used to.
My name is Olivia Johnson, and I'm 36 years old. I have a husband who is 3 years older than me and a son in elementary school. 5 years ago, my husband had an accident that left him paralyzed from the waist down. My husband, who was once the best salesman in his department, had no choice but to quit his job. For him, losing his job was the hardest thing to accept. To escape from reality, my husband started lashing out at my son and me over trivial things. We had days where he would snap back to reality only after seeing our son cry. Once I got the hang of dealing with my husband and told my son to avoid his dad as much as possible when I wasn't around, the outbursts decreased. That's when I started working full-time. Even so, it was impossible for me just starting a new job to earn as much as my husband used to. So I started to take up extra shifts to increase our income a bit. While it left me no time to rest, I worked relentlessly, thinking it was for the sake of my family. Perhaps because of that, I failed to notice the changes in myself. I only realized it when a friend from high school whom I hadn't seen in a long time pointed it out. Looking at me, she said, "You've changed a lot." I could tell from her expression that it wasn't meant as a compliment. We've always been honest with each other. Even so, she seemed at a loss for words. I was curious, so I asked her, "Have I changed that much?" "Don't worry, I won't get mad. Just tell me honestly." Upon hearing my request, she spoke without hesitation. "Okay, if you say so. You've changed so much. It's like you're a different person. You look extremely tired, and your plain style and makeup are something the old Olivia would never wear. You look like you've aged by at least 10 years. Even though I'd asked for honesty, her words hit me pretty hard. But I couldn't deny it. I'm definitely not the person I used to be. When I was in my 20s, I was always checking out the latest fashion and makeup trends. Now I focus only on choosing functional, safe colors and don't even keep up with the latest trends. However, even after realizing this, I just don't have the luxury to enjoy fashion as I used to. Though I felt somewhat pessimistic, I reminded myself, this is only for now. In a few weeks, our multi-generational home will be completed. The plan is for my family and my in-laws to live there. My in-laws suggested this to help lighten my load a bit. I felt bad, but I took them up on their offer. My husband was all for it, too. Ever since we decided on the multi-generational home, my husband's been in high spirits. He, who is usually quiet and hard to read, has been starting conversations with me and our son more often lately. Our son, not used to his dad talking to him, seems confused but also a bit happy. At one point, my husband would yell at our son for unreasonable reasons. Because of that, our son became overly sensitive to his dad's mood. I had been struggling to find a way to improve the relationship between my son and my husband, hoping that living in a duplex might be a good start. But when our long-awaited duplex was finally completed, my husband told me that he had something to discuss. He mentioned that my mother-in-law would also be present, and I had a bad feeling about this. Despite my apprehension, my husband began to speak with a smile on his face. "I can finally tell you, Olivia. I was advised to keep silent until the duplex was finished, but I've been looking forward to this day. I was puzzled, not quite grasping what he was trying to convey. Then, with a casual tone, as if he were talking about today's weather, he said, "Olivia, let's get a divorce, and from now on, let's lead separate lives." It took me a few minutes to comprehend my husband's words. However, it seemed he took my silence as an agreement and triumphantly spread a divorce paper on the table. The document looked legitimate, with signatures from both him and my in-laws. Unable to accept the reality, I looked up, thinking it might be some kind of distasteful prank. But my husband's expression instantly crumbled that thought. I felt a determined resolve in his eyes, a promise to absolutely divorce me. I instinctively turned to my mother-in-law for support, but with an unreadable expression, she simply said, "Sign the paper." I felt betrayed. I thought things were going well with both my husband and my mother-in-law, but perhaps it was only me. Tears welled up as I bit my lower lip and looked down. Meanwhile, my husband continued to speak. "You can take our son, Olivia. He would be happier. Besides, with my health condition, it's impossible for me to take care of him." I cut him off. "Hold on. I never agreed on getting a divorce. You never said anything about this. You can't just decide all this on your own." I voiced my displeasure during the brief silence. "First off, what do you plan to do without me? Do you realize how much I've supported you?" As soon as my husband heard these words, his expression changed. His face turned red and he glared at me, yelling, "That's what I can't stand about you. Your self-righteous way of talking. I didn't choose to be like this, yet you always look worn out, acting as if you're the only one suffering. I felt blamed every time. I'm fed up with you and your victim complex." I lost my words hearing the true feelings of my husband. I couldn't hold back my tears anymore. Seeing me crying, my husband looked annoyed and said, "See, you always play the victim, right, Mom? You'd agree that a wife like her who can't even respect her husband isn't suitable for me, right? Don't worry, my new partner is young and beautiful, and I'm sure you'll like her." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I finally understood the real reason why my husband wanted a divorce. He was having an affair, and he was trying to get rid of me, the obstacle to be with his mistress. I never thought my husband would cheat on me. Not because of his personality, but because I thought there was no chance for him to meet someone else. But I was wrong. He told me how he met his mistress. He met his lover online, and through texting each other every day, they developed feelings and fell in love. Because I only use my phone for minimal communication, learning about this whole online dating thing was bewildering. Looking back, my husband had been glued to his phone recently. Moreover, my husband, engrossed in his phone, seemed to be in an exceptionally good mood. Oblivious to my husband's affair, I would think to myself, "It's nice to see him in a good mood today." Yet for all I know, he may have been secretly inviting that woman over to our place when I wasn't around. Just the thought of it was enough to make my blood boil. Despite our arguments, I had never once considered leaving him before. But now, after hearing his true feelings, I just couldn't imagine being with him any longer. Even if he took back his words and said, "I don't want a divorce after all," I was now determined to leave him. As I made this decision, I heard a loud slap. Startled, I looked up to see my mother-in-law, her face twisted in an expression I had never seen before. My husband's cheek bore a red handprint. Realizing she had slapped him, I was taken aback. I would never have expected my mother-in-law to lay a hand on her son. She turned to me, deeply bowing her head in apology. "I'm really sorry. I apologize for letting you take care of such a despicable son." She uttered these words, her face a mask of profound regret. "Olivia, you're too good for my son. You've done so much for him, more than we could ever thank you for. My husband and I were looking forward to living with you two, but it seems you'll be better off without our son. We will make sure you receive proper alimony and child support, so please, go ahead and divorce him." My husband, his face beet red, tried to retort, but a glare from his mother shut him up. A different kind of tears welled up at my mother-in-law's words. They brought both relief and sadness. Regardless of my husband, I was saddened at the prospect of ending my relationship with my in-laws. Encouraged by my mother-in-law, I filled out the divorce papers. And just like that, my husband and I became strangers. After parting with my husband, I returned to my parents' house with my son. My parents said it was fine to stay with them until things settled down, so I decided to take them up on their offer. I planned to continue working as before, but discussed reducing my workload with my boss. I was considering changing jobs if needed, but my boss agreed to accommodate me without hesitation. To be honest, it took me by surprise. Apparently, my boss had been worried about my excessive workload for a while now. With a wry smile, he said, "I was actually worried you might collapse one day, but knowing your situation at home, I didn't say anything." Feeling guilty, I bowed my head and apologized to my boss for causing him concern. He quickly shook his head, saying, No, it's just me worrying too much. But thinking about it, it's good that you left your ex-husband," and laughed. His words brought a smile to my face, and I nodded in agreement. I also told my coworkers about my divorce. I thought it would be better to let everyone know since I was reducing my workload. I was anxious about their reaction, but when I honestly told them the reason for my divorce, they threw a party for me. I was taken aback by this, but it was a relief that the atmosphere didn't become serious. Although I had awful luck with men, I had the best colleagues at my workplace. By the time all the paperwork had settled, I took our son and left my parents' home. We chose a small apartment as our new home. It was a far cry from the spacious house we were supposed to be living in, but our son didn't show any discontent. Perhaps because he no longer had to worry about his father, he became more vocal about his opinions and his demeanor brightened. It was a change that made me truly appreciate our separation from my ex-husband. The effects of the separation were apparent in me too. By the time I'd finished unpacking after the move, a friend came to visit and celebrate our new home. The last time we met, she was concerned of my well-being, but when she saw me today, she laughed and said that I looked younger than ever. I couldn't help but laugh along. Everything started going smoothly, almost comically so, after the divorce. I suppose my old self was under so much stress, physically and mentally. Now I realized I was merely a maid for my ex-husband back then. I still can't forgive my ex-husband, and I don't want to see him. But I do meet my in-laws once a month now. A while ago, my son got a fever, but I absolutely couldn't take a day off of work that day. And to make matters worse, my parents weren't available either. Out of desperation, I reached out to my in-laws. They immediately came over to take care of my son. We used to barely communicate due to the situation with my ex-husband, but since that day, we make sure to meet at least once a month. They thanked me for letting them see their grandson, but I was grateful that they still loved my son. Even after the divorce, my son occasionally mentioned his grandparents. He never said he wanted to see them, perhaps out of consideration for me, but he did ask how they were doing. After all, they were his beloved grandparents. To be honest, I didn't want to take his grandparents away from him, so it was a relief to know they wanted to see him too. By the way, my son never once mentioned my ex-husband. Even my in-laws knew that we didn't want to see him. However, my ex-husband had a different idea. I was utterly surprised when I heard from my mother-in-law that my ex-husband was considering getting back with us. I thought that things were going well with his mistress. According to my mother-in-law, the mistress moved in shortly after we left. It seemed like they had it all planned out. The mistress was delighted to see the new house and moved in without even getting permission from my in-laws. They were taken aback, but decided to act as if my ex-husband and his new partner didn't exist. At first, the mistress seemed pleased with the minimal interaction with my in-laws, but soon she started showing signs of discontent. Apparently, she thought that my in-laws would be helping with the household chores. She complained about it to my ex-husband. He then said to his parents, "What's this all about? Didn't you promise to help with the housework?" To this, my mother-in-law replied, "We did promise, but that was with Olivia, not with you two." and she ignored anything he said after that. Left with no choice, my ex-husband tried to get the mistress to do everything that I used to do. At first, she reluctantly did as told, but every complaint from my ex-husband caused more strain between them, and then his mistress finally went off on him. She slammed the divorce papers at my ex-husband, saying, "I'm not a maid or a nurse. This is not fun at all, and I can't stand being with you anymore." She left the house. I thought to myself, my ex is pretty bad, but that mistress is quite something too. My mother-in-law, with a bitter smile, commented that my ex-husband's behavior afterwards was the real problem. He refused to admit that he was at fault and blamed his mistress for getting dumped by saying that he got tricked by her. Furthermore, there was no one left to take care of my ex now that his mistress was gone. He couldn't rely on my in-laws either. As a result, for some reason, he thought that if we reconciled, everything would return to how it was. He probably has forgotten the things he did. He told my in-laws that he wanted to get back together with me and asked for their help. When I heard about this, I couldn't help but shudder at the thought of living with my ex again. My mother-in-law quickly reassured me, saying, "Don't worry, we firmly refused." My ex, scolded by my in-laws, gave up on seeing me but now wanted to see our son. My in-laws also refused this. Finally, my in-laws told my ex that if he caused any more trouble to me or our son, they would sever family ties and kick him out. This finally made him give up. It would be difficult for my ex, who was well received by his neighbors and friends, to live relying on others besides his family. I'm glad that my in-laws are not on my ex's side. From now on, I plan to make good use of my past experiences and do my best without pushing myself too hard. I also want to cherish the time with my son, make lots of memories that we couldn't before.
$100 a month for groceries should be enough. What? Wait a minute, that's impossible. If you can't keep it down to $100, we're getting divorced, understand? You can't be serious. So you're not even willing to try, huh? I never thought you are the kind of person who never tried. Such a pathetic woman. I felt a sudden surge of anger when my husband said that. If he's going to mock me like that, then I'll prove him wrong. Fine, then I'll make sure we keep our grocery expenses below $100 a month. My name is Anne, a 29-year-old housewife. My husband John and I have been married for a year. John and I met at a group date and decided to get married after dating for a year. Anne, I want you to stay home and take care of the house once we're married. So I quit my job after getting married and became a full-time housewife. I did like my job, but starting a new life with John was more important to me, so I didn't hesitate to be a housewife. Our life after marriage was sweet and blissful. Every day, I made lunchboxes for John and prepared elaborate dinners. John always said, "Anne, your cooking is really delicious," and his enjoying meals made me very happy. Back then, he had a steady job, and he would always leave work on time and come home early, so the two of us used to have peaceful and happy meals together. But recently, it seems like John's work has become busier, and he's coming home later. He used to be home by 6 p.m., but lately, he often doesn't come home until after 9 p.m. It seems like the increase in work also means he is being counted on more by his superiors and is often invited out for drinks. So every Friday night, he goes out drinking and often doesn't come home until late at night. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't lonely, but John is working hard to improve our life together, so I can't complain. So I decided to make an even greater effort with the lunchboxes, giving John a taste of home. I put so much effort into them. They looked like something you might buy in a department store. So I started making an extra one for myself to eat for lunch, just knowing I was eating the same lunch as John, around the same time during his lunch break, made me feel like we were having a meal together, which was a great comfort. I sincerely hope that my homemade lunchboxes can bring some comfort to my husband, even if it's just a little bit. With that thought in mind, I pour my heart and soul into preparing them. John seemed to notice the changes in the lunches, and after coming home, he would cheerfully say, "Lately, you've been making such extravagant lunches for me. They're all delicious." When he praised me like that, I felt motivated to do even more. Since then, I've continued to work hard on the lunchboxes, making them both tasty and appealing. Before I knew it, cooking was becoming my hobby. I began to take pictures of the lunchboxes and post them on social media, and I was surprised to find that the posts were getting quite a lot of attention. Before, I only had a few followers, mostly friends, but the number of likes and followers started to increase rapidly. This was a first for me, and it was very exciting. I started to see comments from people wanting to know the recipes, so I began to post detailed recipes along with the photos. Sure enough, there were people who tried to imitate and create what I made. I received delightful comments like, "My husband said it was delicious," or "I included it in my child's lunchbox, and they requested it again." And this is a first for me. I was thrilled and was gradually getting into cooking more. It might be even better if prepared in this way. Maybe reducing the amount of this seasoning might bring out the sweetness of the ingredients. As I continued to cook while pondering these things, I found that I had created quite a number of recipes. I hadn't thought I'd pick up a new hobby at this age. My husband John seemed as busy with work as ever, spending less time at home due to overtime and working on weekends. But I didn't feel as lonely as I thought I would, because I used my alone time to study nutrition and even obtained a nutritionist certification. Time flew by, and 2 years of our married life had passed. I started thinking it might be about time to have a child. When I discussed it with my husband, his response was not what I expected. Before we got married, I remember him talking about wanting to have 2 kids, so his reaction was surprising. Maybe he still wants a child, but thinks it's not the right time, or perhaps there has been some change in his mind. Somehow I felt a bit sad, as if we were not able to communicate properly as a couple. Looking back, I feel that John is less interested in me than he used to be. Our intimate nights have obviously decreased, and even when I try to initiate, I get turned down with excuses like, "I'm tired, sorry." He also stopped giving feedback about the lunchboxes I put so much effort into making. I felt increasingly lonely, wondering if this was the so-called marital doldrums. One day, amidst all of this, my husband made a surprising remark. "Anne, aren't you overdoing it with these elaborate dishes?" "Huh? I'm troubled by you squandering the money I earn." "Don't refer to it as squandering. And I haven't been making extravagant expenditures, you know. I'm simply using regular priced ingredients and figuring out recipes to make tasty meals while keeping costs low." "That's impossible. Those visually appealing and tasty lunchboxes must cost a lot to make." "No, not at all. Just a little ingenuity and preparation can change the flavor quite significantly. Don't lie to me. I know you always take pictures of the lunchboxes you make and post them on social media." "Huh?" I didn't expect my husband to know about my social media, but it seemed like he hadn't looked through every detail. "You're always focusing on making it look good for social media. Stop showing off that you can make these luxurious lunchboxes. It's embarrassing to know that my wife is spending money to get likes. I can't accept my earnings being used to satisfy your need for approval." "Why would you say that? I'm not uploading pictures with that intention at all. Initially, I just wanted to share when I managed to make something delicious. And now I'm more focused on challenging myself to enhance the look and taste of meals with cheap ingredients so others can easily imitate. No matter how much I tried to explain to my husband, he wasn't willing to listen. "No need for excuses. $100 per month is more than enough for food expenses." "What?" I was flabbergasted. It would be incredibly hard to keep food expenses for 2 adults at $100 per month. Since John doesn't cook much, he may not know how much it costs. Groceries are not just the cost of the food ingredients. They also include things like beverages, seasonings, oils, and so many more. Keeping it under $100? Impossible. "Oh, hold on a minute. There's no way I can do that." "Why not? Haven't you been trying to save money by being resourceful with your cooking so far? If so, it should be perfectly feasible. If you can't keep it under $100, we're getting a divorce." "What? Divorce? No way." I couldn't understand why my husband John would say such a cruel thing. He used to be so kind. Why did he change? It's unfair to suddenly bring up divorce. If you have any complaints, speak up. Don't make impossible demands. I tried my best to initiate a discussion, but John wouldn't listen. "So, you're not even going to try because you think it's impossible from the start? I never thought you were so pitiful. I guess you're just cooking to satisfy your own need for approval." I was furious when John said that to me. If he's going to look down on me like that, I'll show him. Fine, I'll keep it under $100 for the month. No complaints then, right? "Yeah, make sure it stays under $100. I was being stubborn. I didn't care that John had changed. I decided to focus all my energy on succeeding in this mission of keeping the groceries under $100 for a month. From then on, I started to make various changes to my cooking. I thought about various ingredients that could substitute for meat, and tried using tofu and fish cake. I also experimented with combinations of seasonings to create different flavors, like mixing bean paste and dried bonito into egg liquid to make an egg saboro that tasted like spicy cod roe. By doing so, I was able to significantly reduce the cost of groceries. In addition, I visited various supermarkets and searched online to find stores that sell pasta and drinks for cheap prices, and worked hard to save money. It was close, but I managed to keep the grocery bill under $100. I gave a mental fist pump saying, "Take that, John." However, John didn't ask about the results or anything. He just went on with his life as usual. I was disappointed that he didn't seem interested in something he had proposed. But I didn't know when he might bring up the issue of groceries again, so I decided to continue with the $100 grocery lifestyle. In order to make it as enjoyable as possible, I started a new project on social media, regularly posting about our life on a $100 grocery budget. As before, I posted recipes so that everyone could replicate my budget-friendly meals. I saw a comment about wanting to see a video summary, so I started uploading weekly videos on a video sharing site that neatly summarized what I was doing. To my surprise, I got a lot of feedback, and the number of subscribers on the video sharing site increased rapidly, enabling me to monetize it in no time. I was amazed at how the world has changed. The more people watched, the more motivated I became, and I kept coming up with new recipes. In the midst of everything, my husband John told me he would be going on a 3-day business trip the week after next. With that news, I figured there would be no need for me to cook, so I planned to return to my hometown. My hometown is quite a distance away, so I would need to take a plane. So I quickly reserved my plane tickets. Then, before I knew it, the day had arrived, and John left the house in the morning with his carry-on suitcase. He planned to drop by the office before heading to the airport. A little while after John left, I packed my bags and also headed to the airport. Since I was only going home, I packed light enough to fit everything into a backpack. Since I packed light, I was able to leave the house quickly and without any hassle. Upon arriving at the airport, I found a casual cafe where I sat back and enjoyed a cup of coffee while responding to comments on my videos and social media posts. Then, I heard it. I could hear John's voice somewhere. Even in crowded places, his voice is familiar, so I instantly recognized it was him. I looked in the direction of the sound and saw John walking in front of the cafe. Just as I was about to call out to him, I noticed a woman walking beside him. What's more, they were walking arm in arm, seeming rather close. I couldn't take my eyes off the pair. That was undoubtedly John. Is he having an affair? Was the whole business trip a lie? I was so shocked by what was happening right before my eyes that I was rooted to the spot for a while. My flight was due, so with a heavy heart, I boarded my plane and went home. My parents warmly welcomed me, but noticed my downcast expression and asked me what was wrong. My parents expressed their anger at John, saying what a jerk he is. That lightened my mood a little. After that, I decided to put John aside and enjoy my time at home. My mom's cooking was delicious, and it reminded me of when I first started living alone and worked hard to recreate her taste in my own cooking. After some much-needed relaxation at home, I returned to our house. Immediately upon my return, I hired a private investigator. I had never been more grateful for my advertising income from my social media. A few weeks later, the investigation results came in. In short, John was having an affair. It seems that his mistress was a junior at his office. Furthermore, after investigating in detail, it appears that their relationship had been ongoing for about 6 months. That timeline coincided with when John started working overtime and on weekends more frequently. Could it be that he was spending too much money on his mistress, and that's why he asked me to save on groceries? Thinking this, everything made sense. An intense rage against John welled up within me, pretending to be frugal when all he wanted was to increase the money he could spend. The audacity. I decided to take some action against John. From the next day, I stopped cooking for him. Huh? Where's my lunch? It's too tough to keep food costs down to $100, so I stopped making it. Here, figure something out with this. Saying that, I handed over $2. Huh? What am I supposed to buy with this? You can buy a convenience store rice ball, right? And maybe a ready-made sandwich or something. With the remaining change, you can get some cheap coffee at the office. Just about making ends meet. Don't joke with me. Can I satisfy my hunger with this poor meal? Even if it's $100 a month, we should be able to use a bit more. Nope, that's still barely scraping by. Spending $2 5 days a week for a month already takes up $40. You'd need to prepare a month's worth of dinners with remaining $60. Well, you could get by if you have instant noodles for dinner every day. Are you kidding me? If I keep having such unhealthy meals, I'll get sick. But if we don't stick to instant noodles around $1.50 each, we can't fit within $100. $1.50 for 30 days is $45. Add that to lunch, and you're already at $85. Then you've got to keep your monthly beverage expenses within $15. Once I explained this far, my husband John finally seemed to understand the difficulty of keeping food expenses within $100. Hold on a sec. So you're saying the lunch and dinners you've been making so far exceeded $100? No, I managed to keep it within $100 through my efforts. Then why don't we just continue that? No way. You and I are strangers now. That's why I'm teaching you how to manage food expenses on $100 without me. What? What do you mean? I thrust divorce papers at my surprised husband. Divorce? Why all of a sudden? It's not sudden. I've been preparing ever since I found out about your affair. Upon hearing this, John turned pale. What affair are you talking about? Pretending not to know won't do any good. I showed him photos proving the affair. I had these investigated and got the evidence. Now there's no escaping it. I'm asking for a divorce and compensation. John was dumbfounded with his mouth open. He probably hadn't expected to get caught. But still, he tried to argue back, perhaps because of his high pride. Sure, I may have had an affair. But won't you be in trouble if we divorce? You were a housewife. How will you get by once you're on your own? Your family is far away. What are you going to do? Wouldn't it be better to forgive your husband's one mistake and continue our married life? I was astounded. What a jerk he was to say such a thing. Sorry, but I have quite an income now. Huh? The social media posts you look down on have led to various work opportunities for me. I also get substantial income from ad revenue for my video posts, and I'm about to release a book of money-saving cooking recipes. Recipe book? You're releasing a book? To tell you the truth, I'm earning a lot more than you are, so I'm not worried about being alone. Really? John thought I was just a housewife and has been looking down on me. He was shocked in various ways when he found out I was earning more than him. He was no longer able to say anything and was looking down. Just fill out the darn divorce papers, will ya? If you put up a fight, I'm game for anything. I said that as I grabbed my bags that I had packed in advance and hightailed it out of the house. Afterward, through a lawyer, I communicated with my husband and the divorce went through without a hitch. I also managed to get alimony from my ex-husband and his mistress. Word spread like wildfire through his office about his affair because one of our mutual acquaintances works there. Folks are giving my ex the cold shoulder for betraying his wife, who packed him a loving, homemade lunch every single day. The mistress couldn't take the pressure and quit her job. My ex is apparently strapped for cash because of the alimony and money he showered on his mistress. He can't quit his job, so he kept working at the same company, dealing with an awkward atmosphere at work. On the flip side, I moved into a lovely place with a state-of-the-art kitchen, and I'm cooking a lot more. My recipe book got published, and sales are through the roof. I plan to keep cooking a bunch of dishes and live a fun-filled life.
Amy, you only went to high school in the States? Yeah, I was preparing for college, but due to Dad's situation, I couldn't continue. I remember it being really tough. I chuckled a bit, recalling the rush when Dad suddenly got assigned to work in Switzerland. Wait, what? Amy, you're just a high school graduate? I seriously thought you had a college degree. I feel duped. Excuse me, John? My name is Amy. I got married at 27 and we've been newlyweds for just a month. I met my husband John through work. Not in the same office, but I was at the company where John came as a sales representative. He said he took a liking to me at first sight and pursued me. Given his sales background, he was really good at talking. Before I knew it, we were dating. Within just 3 months of dating, he proposed to me passionately, saying he didn't want anyone else to have me. Shockingly, within just 6 months of meeting, we decided to get married. Many advised us to take it slow. Maybe my long stint living in Switzerland influenced me, but I always preferred passionate people over calm ones. I genuinely loved John, who pursued me aggressively and proposed with such fervor. I believed he was the one for me. Sure, we didn't know much about each other, but that didn't matter. We felt it was enough just to be together and didn't care about a wedding ceremony. We registered our marriage the day after a family meeting and started living together. All I know about John is where he works and that he has a family of 4, his parents and a younger sister. Likewise, John probably doesn't know much about me either. There are things we wish the other knew, but we decided it's more fun to learn about each other gradually. However, both our parents requested we have a wedding. They told us it's a rite of passage, even if it's a small ceremony. Unable to decline, we began planning with the intention of fulfilling our duty to our parents. We planned for a small restaurant wedding just for the family. Still, we were flabbergasted to find out both our parents became close, and were planning a grand wedding without our knowledge. Nevertheless, John said, "If both our parents want it, let's do it." I had no choice but to agree. While I don't like complications, once I'm committed, I need to do things thoroughly. I meticulously checked details like invitations and welcome boards, ensuring everything was perfect. John laughed at the steadily finished pieces, saying, "Typical, Amy. Everything's so precise and warm." That praise made my day. It was during our wedding preparations. Our wedding planner, Lily, asked us to write down our profiles. We filled out the given forms with details, like where we were born and the elementary schools we graduated from. Lily glanced at my paperwork and looked surprised. "Amy, you only went to high school in the States?" "Yeah, I was preparing for college, but due to Dad's situation, I couldn't continue. I remember it being really tough." It was a sudden memory of Dad's abrupt assignment to Switzerland that made me chuckle a bit. "Wait, what? Amy, you're just a high school graduate? I seriously thought you had a college degree. I feel duped." "What did you say, John?" He didn't even acknowledge me. After handing his completed profile to Lily, he abruptly left, even though we were in the middle of our meeting. All we could do was stare, dumbfounded at John's retreating back. What on earth had just happened? Thankfully, the day's meeting was mainly about confirmations, so I handled the rest by myself. Rushing home, I was relieved to see lights on in the house. Entering, I overheard John on the phone. "Yeah, can you believe it? A high school graduate in this day and age. I thought I snagged a top-notch woman from a good place because she's attractive and competent at work, but she's just a high school graduate. Our kids would definitely get ridiculed. I wonder if her being so nitpicky is her way of compensating for her lack of intelligence," he said, laughing out loud. While we did marry soon after meeting, we had never discussed our educational backgrounds. I had no idea John had such an elitist view. Had I known, I wouldn't have married him. I decided to test John's character without revealing my actual education. Even if knowing my background brought us back together, if there's any future incident where my values don't align with John's, being looked down upon and living in fear isn't worth it. If that's the case, he's not the one for me. "I'm home!" I opened the living room door, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. John wrapped up his call, telling the person he'd call back. He then looked at me with cold, condescending eyes. "Ugh, I've been thoroughly deceived by Amy. Guess you wanted to land a high-caliber guy like me with his high education. Bet you're pleased with yourself." "I didn't even know about your educational background. Remember? We agreed to get to know each other more." "You could easily find out. I graduated from a prestigious university. Agreeing to marry this quickly, in hindsight, is suspicious." This side of John was shocking, so mean-spirited. I loved his passion, but I never imagined he could be this impulsive and prejudiced. Deciding to check with my parents, I called home, only to find out they were hosting a party with parents-in-law. It's great that our families get along so well, but at this rate, our marriage was headed for disaster. I quickly relayed today's events to my dad over the phone and mentioned we might not go through with the wedding. "I thought I told John about our family being stationed in Switzerland." Yes, I had mentioned living in Switzerland, and Lily had said, in America, it's just up to high school. So it's baffling how John associated that with just being a high school graduate. Plus, it's utterly disrespectful to those who work after high school or had circumstances that kept them from further studies. On the other end, it sounded like my parents and John's parents were having quite a party, with a lot of laughing. Anyway, I want to continue assessing John's character, so I'd appreciate it if they played along with the misunderstanding. I wasn't sure how much got through to the inebriated party, but John rarely contacts my parents, so it should be fine. After that, I tried to carry on with life as usual, but John's condescending attitude was palpable. He stopped doing chores. Previously, we'd share the tasks, but now everything fell on me. If I asked for help, he'd shoot back, "Do you want a divorce? Be grateful a high-spec guy like me even married a lowly high school grad like you." I felt increasingly repulsed by John, who frequently referred to himself as high-spec. On top of that, he dumped all wedding and honeymoon planning on me. John argued, "Given my high educational background, I have a demanding job. You, with your simple clerical tasks due to your education, surely have more time." And just like that, he stopped contributing to anything. Even though I earn slightly more than John, it seems like he's gotten something twisted in his head. Between work, household chores, and wedding preparations, I felt so overwhelmed. I worried I might collapse from exhaustion. The more I saw of John's behavior, the more I grew to despise him. But we were already legally married, and I had made promises to our parents. Once the wedding was over, we planned to sit down with both sets of parents to discuss our educational backgrounds and how we intended to live as a married couple. Though it's up to us to decide our future, right now our tempers and emotions are flaring. We need to calm down and focus on rebuilding our relationship. Since we've come together as a couple, it's essential not to hastily choose divorce. Holding on to that promise, I'm enduring our current situation. And then the long-awaited wedding day arrived. I felt guilty towards our parents, but truth be told, the spark in our marriage had already fizzled out. However, on that particular day, we played the part of a loving couple, greeting our family and work acquaintances with big smiles. Given the significant business ties, several high-ranking executives expressed their desire to attend, so we had sent out invitations. Looking back, I deeply regretted inviting them to a wedding of a couple on the brink of divorce. The guilt was overwhelming. "Amy, it's been a while," said Sam, John's predecessor, as he approached. "Long time no see. Thanks for coming," I replied. "Amy, I know it's not the best time, but is everything okay with John?" "What do you mean?" "Well, he mentioned you in a recent phone call, and I got concerned." "Is this about the high school graduate thing?" "Yes, I knew about your education in Switzerland and tried to gently correct him, but he wouldn't listen." So, Sam was the one John had been talking to. How could John speak so negatively about his wife, especially to someone from a business partner's company? As I chatted with Sam, other colleagues from John's company approached, showing concern. It seemed John had been bad-mouthing me a lot, and one of his bosses even told me directly that he couldn't support our marriage. Given that I'm being told this at our wedding, John must be making many uncomfortable at work, and they were all concerned for me. Seeing me surrounded by his colleagues, an annoyed John called out to me in a displeased tone. "Amy, it's time! Can't you even manage your time properly?" John scolded. I silently followed behind him, my emotions concealed. I doubt we appeared happy, even up close. I had hesitantly told my friends about our marital issues and suggested they might not want to attend the reception. Still, they insisted, wanting to be there for me. A few even flew in from Switzerland, and their tables, decorated with a Swiss touch, were a topic of interest among the guests. The wedding ceremony concluded without a hitch, and the reception began. Our bosses from both sides gave their welcoming speeches. Following a toast, the meals were served. Yet, throughout it all, John kept a sour expression and just kept drinking his alcohol. "John, that's enough drinking," I said, trying to intervene. Drunk and agitated, John blurted out, "It's all Amy's fault! I had this perfect life planned out. We'd have these amazing hybrid kids, be the envy of everyone, and now..." Suddenly, he got up, snatched the microphone from the host, and started ranting. "Hello, everyone! Thank you for being here. I'm a high-spec guy, having graduated from a top university. Yet, here I am, tricked into marrying a mere high school graduate. But since we're married, I'll try to educate her best I can. The room fell silent. John, seemingly expecting applause, looked around in confusion. Then my boss Daniel stood up and took the microphone. John, are you talking about our Amy? It's funny, after finishing high school here, she went to Switzerland for college due to her father's job assignment. By the way, the head of our US branch rose from being a high school graduate. Is your company's philosophy to look down on such people? Studied in Switzerland? John seemed to snap out of his drunken state instantly, staring at Daniel in shock. Amy, is that true? Yes, I kept it a secret, but after graduating high school in the US, I went to Switzerland for college. I successfully graduated and even secured a job there, but due to a transfer to our US branch, I returned home with my family. By the way, Daniel continued, holding the mic, our US branch's CEO is a high school graduate who's worked their way up. Is John's opinion in line with your company's policies? As Daniel glanced over at the groom's side with the microphone, John's colleagues uniformly shouted out, No! Given our company's superior standing, those from John's side were visibly panicking. Filled with rage, John confronted me. Amy, why didn't you tell the truth? You've made me a laughingstock! We've never talked about our educational backgrounds, remember? And it's pretty disrespectful and presumptuous to look down on high school graduates. I responded, It's all Amy's fault! John, stomping on the ground like a child, angrily blamed me. As I felt a wave of fear, sudden laughter erupted from a table nearby. It was that group of foreigners. In their unique accented English, they exclaimed, Amy, you sure found a character! But seriously, divorce him as soon as possible. Blaming Amy? Huh, that's just hilarious! Their laughter was contagious, and soon the entire hall was in stitches, with everyone gazing at John and laughing till tears flowed. Humiliated, John's face turned beet red and he fled from the venue. I could see our in-laws chasing after him. He'd surely be caught soon. After that incident, Lily advised me to leave. The reception was cut short. My parents and in-laws, with assistance from relatives, returned the wedding gifts, apologizing to the attendees, and even provided transportation fare. That night, instead of returning to my place, I went back to my childhood home. The next day, since both Dad and I had taken a leave, we went together to pick up some belongings from our home. Even my parents, who usually hope for the best, didn't push for reconciliation this time. They apologized for previously wanting us to make up. They probably hadn't realized just how twisted John had become. When I got home, John greeted me with a wide smile. Amy, sorry for leaving early yesterday. I've thought about it. If you're not just a high school graduate, there's no issue. Let's live happily like we used to. I'll help around the house, and I miss the meals you make. His words and smile were reminiscent of our early days together. But this different John, so different from the past few months, was actually frightening. You expect me to just forget everything? I can't be with someone who's so prejudiced about education. I'll divorce you and claim compensation for all the verbal abuse you've thrown at me, including the wedding costs. What? We're not getting divorced. It's not my fault I didn't know. You should have told me. Now I feel like I should be the one claiming compensation. John, during our family meetings, we mentioned Amy lived in Switzerland from 18 till she started working. What did you think she was doing in Switzerland all those years? Well, the planner said she only went up to high school. In America, she only attended up to high school. That's what was said. You can't be vague like that. You should have clearly said she studied in Switzerland. So you're saying we didn't provide enough information? Exactly. You need to explain things clearly. If we need to explain everything from A to Z and you don't try to understand the context or ask questions, then every time you don't like what's being said, will my daughter always get verbally abused by you? I'm sorry, but we're taking her back. We can't leave her in a place where we know she'll get hurt. No, wait! It's just a typical marital spat. There's no need for a divorce now. I do care about Amy, and there's no reason for me to hurt her anymore. John's tone started to waver as my dad firmly suggested divorce. You might have decades together, but with different values, many issues will arise. There'll always be a reason for you to hurt her. Amy, let's go. Upon my dad's command, I quickly packed the essentials. John kept insisting that everything was fine and that they wouldn't divorce. Yet, anyone who looks down on others doesn't align with my values. It's that simple. Leaving a tearful John behind, I walked away from our home. I couldn't help but wonder, if he was so against the divorce that it brought him to tears, why did he continuously hurl such harsh words at me? Eventually, with the help of lawyers, the divorce was finalized and I was granted the compensation I had asked for. Even after the divorce, my parents remained close with my former in-laws. They often had parties at our place. One time, John's name came up in a conversation. He had continued his condescending behavior, both during the wedding reception and at work. This, combined with the distrust he caused with business partners, led his company to conclude that he didn't fit their values. As a result, he was moved away from any promotional path to a less significant role. Having always been prideful, he immediately handed in his resignation and left. Now he's working a part-time job. He's repeatedly mentioned wanting to move back home and promised to repay all the compensation money he owes. However, they've told him not to return until he's settled his debt. Despite this, they say he calls them nearly every day. According to my former in-laws, John had been pretty average throughout college. But during his job hunting days, he noticed a wealthy friend who had attended a more prestigious state university than him easily land a job at a major company through connections. Witnessing this made John believe that in the world, education, money, and connections were all that mattered, leading him to adopt a skewed perspective. Being among the more educated in his company, he received praise from his colleagues, which apparently didn't help. He began looking down on others, which led to the current situation. While John might have his reasons, the loss of important values like compassion and respect for others is his own responsibility. Unless he addresses his flawed character, he'll likely repeat the same mistakes wherever he goes. Not that it's my concern anymore. Recently, my company proposed that I return to our headquarters in Switzerland. Although my parents wish to stay in the US, after some contemplation, I've decided to start fresh and live alone in Switzerland. I spent my youth there, and in some ways, I feel more at home there than in the US. With an expected pay raise and the allure of potentially finding a new love, I'm hoping to find happiness once more.
Infertility treatment? What a waste of money. If we're infertile, the cause must be you. My husband hurled those harsh words at me, and in the end dropped a massive bombshell. I'm going to divorce my infertile wife and marry your sister instead, haha. Indeed, my husband chose his sister-in-law over his infertile wife. My name is Linda. I live with my husband, Nathan. Days spent with my beloved husband were indeed happy days. However, we had a hard time trying to have a baby. The discussion about infertility treatment began about 2 years into our marriage. Hey Nathan, I think it's time we started thinking about having a baby. Nathan responded with a lack of enthusiasm. Infertility treatment comes with various burdens, right? Both physically and financially. That's true, but if it's going to help us conceive, I think it's okay to give it a try. Well, maybe, but... Nathan didn't deny the idea of infertility treatment, but he was also not eager to proactively engage in it. I had become a housewife when Nathan had transferred for his job, so I guess he has financial concerns. Don't worry about the money. It's been 6 months since we moved, and I'm getting used to this place. I'm thinking about finding a job soon, so we don't have to worry so much about finance, right? If I can start earning an income, we'll have more financial flexibility than we do now. With that, he would probably become more open-minded and supportive towards the treatment, but he reacted differently than I expected. Well, it'd be great if you could start working. But? I don't know how I feel about you finding a job for the sake of getting treatments. It's like putting the cart before the horse. Don't most people conceive naturally? That's not necessarily true. Women's bodies aren't that simple. I hear that when couples can't have kids, the cause is usually the female. Slightly irritated by Nathan's words, I responded. I do hear that often, but there are cases where the male may be the cause, you know. Alcohol, obesity, even diseases from childhood can cause male infertility. He frowned disapprovingly.
Maybe, but statistically speaking, it's more likely to be the female, right? I mean, I haven't had any major illnesses, and I only drink socially. I doubt the issue is with me.
So you're saying you think it's my fault?
I didn't say that. I'm just generally speaking.
Even though he didn't say it outright, it was clear that he believed I was the reason for our infertility. But it was true that I couldn't rule out the possibility that there might be factors on my side, so I went to get an infertility test at the hospital. To make matters worse, my mother-in-law was standing outside our door waiting for me when I returned home. "Linda, where have you been? You're a housewife and yet you're always out. Hurry up and let me in, it's terribly hot outside." My mother-in-law always visits without notice, keeping tabs on me. Regardless of how well I kept up with the household chores, she consistently found something to criticize, pointing out things like, "This spot is dirty," and "This isn't good enough." Reluctantly, I let her in, and the first thing she said was, "So, I hear you've decided to start infertility treatment?" "Huh? Why do you know about that?" "I obviously heard it from my son." "Is that so?" I was planning to wait and assess the situation before bringing up the topic with my husband again, so the fact that he had already talked about it with his mother was a surprise. "You see, we let you marry our son for the sake of our family's heir. Yet, 2 years after marriage, you still haven't managed to get pregnant. I don't even know why we approved this marriage in the first place." "I apologize for not having been able to bless you with a grandchild yet, but Nathan and I are committed to making every effort to conceive in the near future." Upon hearing my non-confrontational response, my mother-in-law let out a deep sigh. "Linda, dear, if trying hard was all it took to get pregnant, no one would have any trouble, right? After all, it's clear that you're the cause of this infertility, so maybe you should consider a divorce or something."
"What? Divorce?"
"It makes sense, doesn't it? There's no way my son is the cause." Like mother, like son. Not only my husband, but also my mother-in-law doubted that I was the cause. Apparently satisfied with her outburst, my mother-in-law left for the day. Upon my husband's return from work, I relayed the comments made by his mother.
"See, even Mom says the problem isn't me. If we're infertile, it must be you, Linda."
He responded with a smug look while nodding in agreement. There was no point in fighting back. He wouldn't consider the possibility that he might be at fault, not even for a second. I decided to wait for my infertility test results. I visited the hospital again a few days later, where the doctor told me a surprising fact.
"So, we didn't find any issues with you."
"Is that so? But then why?" The doctor began awkwardly.
"Please have a talk with your husband. If you really want a baby, it would be best for him to also get tested."
"Have my husband get tested?"
"We can't definitively say the cause lies with just one of you. However, pregnancy is something that requires cooperation from both spouses. Just to be sure, I recommend that your husband also get tested."
"Is that so? I wasn't the cause." While I was relieved at the doctor's words, I wondered how to break the news to my husband. If I tried to be roundabout, it would only make things more complicated. "I've got the test results. Let's talk about it tonight." I texted him and decided to wait for him to come home. As I was preparing dinner, my husband returned. Behind my husband, inexplicably, stood my mother-in-law as well. Mother-in-law, why?
"I invited her. When I told her that the test results were out, she said she wanted to come."
My husband had a look of ease on his face. They appear completely oblivious to the possibility that he might be the cause. "Linda, hurry up and tell us the results. Although I can already guess without asking, haha." To my smirking mother-in-law, I responded clearly. There were no issues with me. The doctor suggested Nathan also get tested.
"Huh? Why me?"
Faced with the unexpected turn of events, my husband was obviously dissatisfied. "What do you mean, why? Pregnancy is something a couple has to work on together, isn't it? I had no issues, so now it's your turn to get checked."
"What's that supposed to mean? Are you saying the problem is with me?"
That's not what I'm saying. If we both get tested and neither of us is the issue, that's reassuring. If by any chance you are the issue, then we just have to get the proper treatment. As I tried to appease my angry husband, my mother-in-law interrupted. Stop this nonsense. Nathan has always been healthy. There have never been any issues with him. It's impossible for him to be the cause. It seemed as though she hadn't been listening to a word I said, as she stubbornly insisted that her son was not the issue. To convince them both, I showed them the medical report I received from the doctor. Look, I got this today. It clearly shows that they didn't find anything. Yet, both Nathan and my mother-in-law casually glanced over the report, showing little interest in actually reading it thoroughly. Clearly, they were reluctant to accept the reality. Nathan finally blurted out an outrageous statement.
Women are the ones who get pregnant, so the problem must be with you.
Wait a second, I just showed you the test results. His mother once again interjected, shrugging her shoulders in disbelief. This must be a fake report anyway, right? Going to such extremes just to avoid a divorce. You're truly a frightening woman.
What? Why would I do such a thing? Stop saying ridiculous things.
Ignoring my protest, the two continued their conversation. Hey Nathan, wouldn't a younger woman be better?
Maybe. This could be good timing.
Oh yeah, with her? Strike while the iron is hot, as they say.
With her? What were these people talking about?
A few minutes later, an unbelievable fact slipped out of Nathan's mouth.
Well, actually, I've impregnated your sister.
What?
We recently found out she's pregnant. If I were infertile, she wouldn't be pregnant, right?
My sister's pregnant? I was so stunned that I couldn't think straight. Nathan continued without paying attention to my state.
So, here's the thing. I'm thinking of marrying your sister. Mom has been saying she wants a grandchild soon after all.
My mind went blank and I felt like collapsing right then and there. An affair with my sister? And she's pregnant and they're going to get married? Wait, Sarah's still in college. And she has a boyfriend.
Yeah, but apparently she fell for me.
When did this?
We've been seeing each other for a while now.
Nathan reveals the cruel truth nonchalantly. He was having an affair with my sister while we were discussing our infertility issues? Abandoned by my husband and betrayed even by my own sister. I had no idea any of this was happening while we were discussing our infertility. My mother-in-law further compounded my already speechless state with her insults. Do you understand now? My son is perfectly capable of getting a woman pregnant, so you're the issue. We don't need a wife who can't bear children.
That's true.
Nathan agreed with his mother.
It's settled then. We're getting a divorce. I already have the papers. Fill them out quickly.
He seemed thrilled as he thrusted the divorce papers at me. Are these people sane? Impregnating your wife's sister and planning to remarry? That's outrageous. That's when I felt it, the surge of anger that I can't even put into words. Fine, we'll get a divorce, but you're going to pay me alimony. Once we'd agreed, he immediately kicked me out of our home.
See you around, you barren lady. I'll find happiness with your adorable sister.
Later, I returned to my parents' home and explained the situation to them. They were enraged, but the truth is, they disowned my sister a long time ago. I was the only family member that my sister still had contact with. Her reckless behavior, particularly concerning money and relationships, had caused our parents a great deal of trouble. She was disowned by her parents once she started college. Nevertheless, she is my one and only sister. I'd regularly invited her to our home for meals with my husband. And this is how things end up. My parents said they summoned Sarah and my husband to give them a scolding. But I told them that was unnecessary. I knew that even if they got together, it wouldn't work out. And several years later, it was a few years later when I got remarried to Gary, someone I met at my new job, and we were soon blessed with a daughter. One day when we were out as a family, I heard a voice say,
Hey Linda, is that you?
Nathan.
Long time no see.
The voice belonged to my ex-husband. He took a quick glance at my daughter and current husband, then spoke to me with bitterness.
Ah, so you were married. Lucky you, someone took you in.
Mind your own business. How's your marriage with my sister going? At this, my ex-husband made a sour face. Just as I thought. I pretended to know nothing and asked him, "What's with the face? You should be happy you ended up with a child with my sister instead of me."
Well, you see,
he replied with a pale face.
Sarah was really unfaithful. Even after she gave birth, she used my money to cheat on me. Now we're divorced. She even took our child with her after all the baby stuff she made me buy.
Oh dear, that sounds like quite a disaster for you, I replied, though I knew all along. I was aware of my sister's promiscuous behavior, which resulted in numerous troubles. Every time she ended up demanding money from our parents. Looking around and seeing that my daughter and husband weren't around, my ex-husband suddenly turned to me.
Hey, would you consider giving us another chance?
Excuse me? Don't you think it's a little too late for that? As you can see, I'm remarried.
But your daughter's a stepchild, right? You shouldn't have to go through the trouble of caring for someone else's child. I don't need children anymore. Let's live freely together.
He must have thought that my daughter was my stepdaughter. This man, after all this time, still didn't suspect my fertility. I boldly told this mistaken man the truth. What are you talking about? That girl's my biological daughter.
Huh?
His expression at that moment is something I can never forget, even to this day. He had a dumbfounded look, about 5 times more than usual.
Weren't you infertile?
Trembling, he asked. I explained politely. Well, isn't it unfortunate? We conceived our daughter right after I married my husband. But more importantly, I wonder who the actual father of Sarah's child is. I looked at my ex-husband with a wicked smile. His face was pale.
Hey, what do you mean by that?
Oh, don't worry about it. Just curious, you know? I knew my sister was promiscuous. I also knew the cause of our infertility was you. In other words, you were used by my sister.
Used?
Yes, she probably didn't care who she was marrying as long as she had a man to raise her child. And you, who misunderstood, fell into my sister's scheme and married her, unknowingly raising another man's child.
So, you mean I was deceived into being a surrogate father?
He fell to the ground and clung to me, crying inconsolably.
Please, you're the only one for me. I was abandoned by Sarah, my child, even my own mother. I'll end up all alone.
I don't care. That's the result of your actions, right? It's quite pathetic to be acting this way for someone your age. I looked down and threw those words at him. He slumped his shoulders, completely disheartened. Ever since, despite our conversation, he has kept sending me desperate texts.
I was wrong. I want to start over. You're the only one for me. Please come back. I won't cheat anymore.
But I blocked all of them without replying. It seems my ex-husband later requested a DNA test for the child. As a result, it was confirmed that the child was not his. To this day, he's in a state of self-isolation at home, not even going to work. Being abandoned by his mother, his only ally, feels like he's getting what he deserves. I, of course, haven't seen my ex-husband since that day. I have a family that is incomparably more precious. I couldn't care less about that man. I want to continue to prioritize my husband, who chose me, and our daughter, who came into our lives, focusing on them as we cherish each day.